And this leads to unjustifiably large losses, if not to say, to very large or catastrophic losses for the Ukrainian army. He is becoming toxic for society as a whole. And this, in my opinion, is evidenced by today's vote in the Verkhovna Rada to extend his powers. Finally, he drove himself into a dead end with a decree banning negotiations with the Russian Federation on a peace treaty. He stopped these negotiations. And what's the matter? The matter is that he is avoiding these negotiations. Why? Because if these negotiations begin, sooner or later, and most likely quite quickly, this will lead to the need to lift martial law. And as soon as this happens, he will immediately have to go to the elections. Then there will be no reason not to hold elections, because today elections in Ukraine are not held under the pretext of martial law. And if there are negotiations, then there will be a possible quick need to lift martial law. Then he will immediately have to go to the elections. And here the current head of the Kiev regime has a problem. Because in fact it does not matter how many percents he has in the rating, for or another. Another thing is important. His rating, according to our data, is objective. And it is exactly 2 times less than that of his possible closest political rival. This is Mr. Zaluzny, the former commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, whom they exiled to London. His rating is exactly twice as high. And if we add to this the possible support of this possible candidate from other political figures, including former prime ministers or former presidents, then the current head of the Kiev regime has absolutely no chance of winning the elections. His chances are 0. But, of course, this is only if something is not grossly rigged. But this is also bad for him, because it will be very noticeable. Therefore, he is a factor in the disintegration of the army, society, and the state. And the current U.S. President Trump certainly understands this and is pushing him to the elections. He wants to do the following. As it seems to me, he wants to improve the situation, the political situation in Ukraine, consolidate society, create conditions for the survival of the Ukrainian state. And in general, this is not so much for the benefit of Russia. We still have a conflict with the current regime, as it is for the benefit of Ukraine itself. Among other things, the current U.S. president has declared that he wants to achieve peace. And by the way, so do we, and as quickly as possible. And the current head of the Kiev regime is an obstacle to achieving this goal. This is where the position of the President of the United States, as it seems to me, comes from. And it is not connected with the fact that this is in our Russian interests. Most likely, it is in the interest of Ukraine, the Ukrainian state, with the goal of preserving Ukrainian statehood. We have nothing against this either. Although, of course, we would like this territory not to be used as a springboard for an attack on the Russian Federation, not to be used as a hostile springboard for us, so that ultimately it turns into a friendly neighboring state. Every day we hear many different statements from Trump. You have met with him more than once. You recently had a telephone conversation. Does he act on emotions? Of course not. Naturally, the current head of the regime in Kiev gives a reason to show these emotions. But from what I have just said, something completely different emerges. These actions of Trump are based, rather, not on emotions, but on cold calculation, on a rational approach to the current situation. In the current situation, oddly enough, frankly speaking, we were interested in Zelensky continuing to decompose the Kiev regime, with which we are in armed conflict. And from the point of view of the interests of strengthening Ukrainian statehood, of course, here we need to act, apparently, more energetically and in a completely different direction. It is necessary to bring to power people who will enjoy the trust of the people of Ukraine. And do the Europeans even understand, in your opinion, the essence of the current alignment around Ukraine? Well, you should ask them. Judging by the way they act, it seems to me that they do not really understand it. But that is not even the point. The point is that, unlike the new President of the United States, the political leaders of European states are connected with the current Kiev regime. They're engaged. And they have said and promised too much. And now, excuse the simplicity of expression, it is very difficult or almost impossible for them to steer away from this position without losing face. And considering that they are in a rather difficult and responsible domestic political period for them, elections, re-elections, they have difficulties in parliament, and so on, then, given these circumstances, it is practically impossible for them to change their position. Unlike them, the current President of the United States, the new President, the newly elected President, his hands are untied. He is free from these networks that do not allow him to move forward and work towards resolving the conflict. And in his character, he probably has the ability to act straightforwardly and without any particular embarrassment. He is in a unique position. He does not just say what he thinks. He says what he wants. Well, this is the privilege of the leader of one of the large and great powers. A few days ago in St. Petersburg, I asked you about the fact that everyone now wants to have some kind of voice in Russian-American negotiations. But the Europeans continue to insist and demand the right to vote in the negotiations around Ukraine. How do you assess this? I do not see anything bad here. Probably. No one can demand anything here, especially from Russia. Let them demand from someone else. For thousands of years they have demanded anything from their vassals. Now they are demanding from them. Therefore, let them sit at home with their demands and think about how they got to this point in their lives. But their participation in the negotiation process is in demand, of course, and we have never refused to negotiate. We have had constant discussions with them. At some point, under all sorts of far-fetched ideas to defeat Russia on the battlefield, they themselves refuse to contact us. If they want to come back, welcome. I saw their reaction to our telephone conversation with the U.S. President, and I saw their reaction to the high-level meeting in Riyadh. Indeed, this reaction is emotional and devoid of any practical meaning. Why? Because in order to resolve complex and even acute issues, including on the Ukrainian track, both Russia and the United States must take the first step. What does it consist of? This first step should be dedicated to increasing the level of trust between both states. This is what we did in Riyadh, and this is what the next possible high-level contacts will be devoted to. Without this, it is impossible to resolve any issue, including such a complex and acute issue as the Ukrainian crisis. But what do the Europeans have to do with this? This concerns bilateral Russian-American relations. Why do we need the Europeans here? What will they do here? And in the telephone conversation, by the way, and at the meeting in Riyadh, of course, the problems related to the Ukrainian crisis were touched upon. But it was not discussed there in essence. We only agreed that we would approach this. But in this sense and in this case, of course, we are not refusing the participation of European countries. But I want to emphasize We also respect the position of our friends from BRICS, who created a group of supporters of peace. Today, I spoke with the chairman of the People's Republic of China, and we also discussed this. He informed me that the Friends of Peace group in New York will meet again soon, and they will discuss this. Not only do we welcome this, we are grateful to all our partners who raise these issues, who strive to achieve peace. Why am I saying this? Not only Europeans, but also other countries have the right and can participate, and we respect this. I wanted to ask you to comment on a few more statements by Trump, of which, as I said, there are a lot, but not all of them. Okay, not all of them. For example, he said that he wants to offer you and the head of China to cut defense budgets in half. How do you like this idea? I know, I can guess what this is based on. It is based, apparently, on the calculations of one of the British research centers, which said that our military spending was calculated at purchasing power parity. Last year, the U.S. had, I think, already $968 billion. And if you add up Russian and Chinese spending, then these figures are approximately the same. Russian and Chinese together. If you compare them with the American ones, well, first of all, we need to calculate all this. The calculations of the British Center may be correct, or they may not be very correct, or completely incorrect. We need to look at this. First, second, I cannot comment on how the People's Republic of China will react to this. There were different approaches from the American side regarding strategic offensive weapons and other very serious issues. Therefore, this is a matter for the People's Republic of China. But we could agree with the United States. We are not against it. It seems to me that this is a good idea. The United States would reduce these military spending by 50%. Then we would reduce them by 50%. And the People's Republic of China would then join this process, if it wants. We believe that this proposal is good, and we are open to discussions on this matter. Trump also imposed duties of 25% on steel and aluminum imports from all countries. And we once worked well with the United States on the aluminum issue. How do you like this trade policy? Now, I do not want to comment on the trade policy of the United States. It has been associated with sanctions for many years. We consider these sanctions illegal and harmful to world trade, to the economy. And, in my opinion, such a policy harms both us and those who introduce these sanctions. And as for trade policy, increased rates, duties, and so on, each country determines this independently. What is beneficial to it, and what is not beneficial to it? I can understand the logic. They want to drag production to themselves, create jobs, force people to pay taxes at all levels of the tax system, and so on. But at some point, of course, these actions will encounter certain difficulties associated with inflationary pressure, with the increase in the cost of goods, and so on. But experts know this. They will tell you about it in detail. As for aluminum, in 2017, in my opinion, we supplied about 15% of aluminum from all American imports. That is, about 15% of aluminum came from Russia. In general, the United States, if my memory serves me right, produces about 60% of the required aluminum itself, and 40% they receive through imports. 15% came from the Russian Federation. The main importer today is Canada. If a decision is made to open the American market for our producers, then we could sell about 2 million tons of aluminum on the American market. This would not have a significant impact on price formation, but, in my opinion, it would still have a restraining effect on price stabilization. But besides this, and most importantly, in my opinion, we could think about working together with American companies in this area. For example, in the Krasnoyarsk territory, back in Soviet times, there were plans to build a new hydroelectric power station and create additional aluminum production. After all, aluminum production, first of all, requires energy, and preferably cheap energy. Hydroelectric power is cheap. And besides everything else, it is also environmentally friendly. Therefore, I repeat, there were such plans back in Soviet times. Although these are capital-intensive and investment-intensive projects, according to preliminary estimates, such a plan would cost about $15 billion in today's prices. Well, we can think about it. Yes, the policy of the current U.S. president today is to place production on the territory of the United States. But if American companies work here, this is also a considerable benefit, because the companies will earn a lot, and the corresponding volumes of aluminum will enter the domestic market at absolutely acceptable market prices. There is something to think about here, as well as to think about joint work on rare and rare earth metals, but also in other areas, including, for example, energy. By the way, a few minutes ago I read another news item from the United States. President Trump said that the United States and Russia are discussing major economic projects as part of the negotiations on Ukraine. Yes, some of our companies are in contact with each other and are discussing such projects. Thank you very much. Thank you.